Hi, how you doing? I've got a few things on the go today. I'm going to dig up, divide, and replant some tulip bulbs. I'm going to plant some daffodils in this bed, and also some Fritillaria. And finally, I'm going to dig up some Oriental Lilies in another flower bed, and I'm going to bring them over here to join with their friends. I'm Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, and this is my Sass garden. So I have 2 clumps of Oriental Lilies in here. I feel like it was one bulb and they've multiplied because they sort of surprised me this year when I had so many blooms from the Oriental Lilies. The stems are still green and I'm not going to cut them because it is really good for the lily stems to die down slowly and as naturally as possible. The dying down of the foliage feeds next year's growth. I mark the lilies just to make sure I'm digging up the right ones. I marked them with, these are really handy, little hair clips. So I knew which ones I'm digging up. Digging up lilies is not a difficult process, but they aren't always necessarily right underneath the stem. So you do want to start out a few inches away before you dig. They're probably going to be about 6 inches, maybe 5 inches deep. And so we had a nice rain. They should come up fairly easily. And there they are. You can see the bulb there. I'm not going to take all the soil off because I'd like them, I can take that top stuff off, but I'd like them to stay intact going into the soil as much as possible. But yeah, those are Oriental Lily bulbs, and you can see that they are multiplying for sure. And I just have one more clump to dig up. So it looks like there's 5 stems here, and this one, I don't know what this is, so I'm also going to dig up that one. And that's nothing. Good. So again, you want to go deep and a few inches out, lift slowly, and there it is. And it looks like I possibly sliced a little bit of it. Should still be all right. Yeah, I did. I'll go in straighter on these, straight down instead of on an angle to try and avoid slicing off bits of them. There we go. They really did bloom very nice this year. Perfect. So just a little bit about this raised bed. This is the south side of our house, so it is more protected. It is open to the bottom. There's nothing under there except more soil. And I'm going to say it's 16 to 18 inches high. When we first put it in, I filled the bottom with branches and garden refuse and just whatever I could to fill the first, say, 12 inches, and then we put soil and peat moss and things of that nature on top. And so that stuff underneath is decomposing, and every year the bed sinks just a little bit more. I've been growing a multitude of things in here, and all annual, rather. A few years ago, I had some Oriental lilies that I had been growing in pots, and I had nowhere to put them. And so I thought, oh, I'll just put them here and see how they do. And sure enough, they wintered. And they wintered again. And this year, I added more Oriental Lilies. They did wonderfully here. And I think they will continue to winter. So the thing about Oriental Lilies is that they come up a little bit later than Asiatic lilies. They bloom later, and they need about a 6-week window to die down so that the dying down of the foliage can feed the bulb for next year. If that doesn't happen, the bulb weakens. You know, if I had it planted out somewhere else, not against a building where the soil warms quickly and they come up a little earlier than if they were planted out in a bed in the backyard, for example, they would come up later. They would probably be blooming now, just as we're about to have frost, and they wouldn't have that opportunity to die down over a 6-week, 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, 4 at a minimum. 6 weeks is good, and then that develops a nice strong bulb for next year. At the same time, last fall, when I was at Costco, I saw bags of Fritillaria. There were 4 bulbs in the bag of Fritillaria, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a try. And so I planted them just close to the house, just to see. And sure enough, this spring they came up. They bloomed beautifully. So I bought another bag to put in this fall on the other side, and we'll see if they continue to winter just as well. I went on to think, well, since the lily bulbs are doing good, let's try some tulips. The Darwin tulips are, I believe, some of the hardiest out there. And I chose a bag of Darwin tulips. I planted a row of 50 in here. They bloomed beautifully and died down naturally. I planted annuals in here and anemones to hide the dying down of the foliage of the tulip bulbs. And so I'm going to dig up those tulip bulbs today because I have unearthed one just to see what's going on, and they've multiplied. One bulb is now 3. So I'm expecting there to be an additional 2 small bulbs along with each big bulb. I'm going to dig up and discard the 2 small bulbs. You could replant them and grow them on somewhere. I don't have room to do that, so I'm not going to bother with planting the little bulbs. They will probably only come up with a leaf or 2 next year if I allowed them to grow. And so, yeah, I'm going to dig up and replant the tulip bulbs in here because they did winter well, they grew well, they looked very nice. At the same time, I've never grown daffodils in Saskatchewan. I think I did when we were living in Ontario, but I'm going to try daffodils in here. I got a big bucket, and they're trumpet daffodils, and I'm going to give them a try. There's a lot of them. I'm not sure if I'll be able to stuff them all in, but you know, I'm going to give it a good whirl. So I've already dug up a few and found where my row starts, and so there they are from last year, and there's little roots starting on them. I believe this is a small one, but I'm going to dig them all up, and then I'm going to replant only the biggest ones, like that size. But they look good. At the same time, you can look for rotted sections. They would be discarded if there was any, and anything that doesn't look quite right, then I would get rid of them. So I'm going to go ahead and dig up this row, see what we get out of it at the end of it all. There is a good example of something to throw out because it's moldy. The one right next to it was fine, but this one I'll toss. This is a good example of how they multiply. You know, just like the shallots that we did not too long ago, they just pull apart quite easy. And so this one has two little ones attached, and then kind of a medium-sized one full of roots. I'm not going to plant that one. So I'm just going to pick out the biggest bulbs. I don't necessarily have to have 50 again, especially since I'm going to plant some daffodils at the same time. And yeah, some of these bulbs are really nice size. So there's one that at first blush looked really nice and big, but then a piece of it peeled off, a little offset. There's another one just down here. I can leave that one. Still a nice big bulb. Here, there's a little offset. That's the start of a new bulb. It's quite attached though, so I'm not going to peel it off because I don't want to damage the bulb. And they're all got a little bit of roots, so hopefully they re-root easy enough. You could do this as soon as the foliage dies down, but of course I had all kinds of annuals planted in that bed and the anemones that I wasn't able to dig them up at that time. The rest of these I'll toss, but some of them, there's all sizes, but some of them are as small as that. This, chances are that probably would produce a bloom, possibly. I don't know if that's 6 centimeters around or not. But as I said, I have plenty, and I want to put daffodils in there as well to see how they do. And so yeah, those will become, maybe they'll bloom in the compost. Now before I get on to planting the tulips and the daffodils, I'm going to transplant the lilies that I dug up. Then we're going to put on a mixture of compost and manure onto the bed, top dress it and dig it in a little bit, and then I'll get to planting the rest of the bulbs. I'm also going to plant the Fritillaria because they kind of go in the same area as the Oriental Lilies. And so they come 4 to a pack. There's 2 red and 2 yellow. And it says here, these bulbs will keep rodents away. And I'll tell you, the bulbs, and when they're growing, they smell like skunk. They really do. So they are a very big bulb, and they're hollow here on the inside. And for that reason, it's recommended that they're planted on their sides so that water doesn't get in there and freeze and thaw and rot the inside. These already have some nice roots. There's a little bit of dryness on the side, but it doesn't look diseased at all. I think it's just dry skin. On this one you can see that hollow section even better. And it's like hollow all the way down. So you can see the reason for the recommendation to plant them on their sides. They're planted 8 inches down, and it's recommended as well to plant them about a foot apart. Okay. So I'm going to plant in this section here. I'm hoping I don't dig up a lily bulb because I did plant 1 or 2 in here that the emerging stem had broken off. And so they didn't grow this year, but there is bulbs down there, and I'm sure they will grow at some point. There's another tulip bulb. But I remember leaving this space thinking that I would plant more Fritillaria here, so it should be safe. Yep, I think we're good to go. So I'm planting it quite deep. I think that should be about 8 inches, and just on its side. And I'll just leave that there just so I know how far apart. That was a yellow, and this will be a yellow. They really are a beautiful bloom when they come up, and they bloom for quite a long time. I did have to cover the emerging stems a couple times in the early spring because they're close to the house. they started popping up quite early. They're not a late bulb. And so again, on its side. And so I wasn't sure as to frost tolerance. So I did cover, I mean, there was just 4 stems, so it was fairly easy to cover them. And then this is a red one. The bulbs look good. I bought them about a month or so ago, and I've had them just on the basement floor, right on the concrete. Our basement is quite cool, so they stayed cool. I think I read that it's recommended that they be planted pretty much as soon as you get them, but of course I couldn't get in the bed at that point, so I didn't. And now that the Fritillaria are all planted, now I'm going to go ahead in this back row before I get started here. I'm going to plant in these Oriental Lilies. So I've just dug a bunch of holes. I had to be careful because, as I said, I knew I had a lily bulb in here, and it's right here, one that is in there, but it didn't grow this year. And so I'm not going to plant them really deep. I'm going to plant them at the same depth as they were. And here's a fun fact about lilies, is that if they're planted too shallow, they will pull themselves into the earth. And if they're planted too deep, they will push themselves up. And they know where they want to grow. And so I'm not saying plant shallow, but if you're not sure, it's not a big deal. But I would, for sure go 4 inches, 5 inches deep, and then let them figure it out after that. I also think that for the amount of bulb that you get, like, it's not very big. For the amount of bulb you get compared to the amount of stem and the amount of flowers that you get, I always think that the bulbs should be really massive, kind of like those Fritillaria, but they're not. I think this one has to be just a little deeper. Oh, the soil is more compacted down there for sure. Last year I planted the tulips in a long row, and they look nice, but I thought this year I would try planting them into groups instead, along with groups of daffodils and bunches of tulips. I'm not sure if they're going to bloom at the same time. It would be nice if they did, but I feel like the daffodils will bloom earlier. However, I think I'm going to do groups of like about 10. This is a lot of daffodils. I don't know if I'll plant them all. Like the tulips, I'm going to plant the biggest bulbs. But yeah, there's some nice big size ones. This is a double, and so is this one. But still, nice, great big bulbs. So I think that bigger bulbs may have a better chance of surviving. That's my thought anyway. Okay. The tulips, I know, I put them down about 4 or 5 inches. And I'm just seeing, yeah, daffodils, it says 6 inches deep and 6 to 8 inches apart. Well, mine aren't going to be 6 to 8 inches apart. They'll be lucky if they have a hand width apart, so 3 or 4 inches. It says light, full sun to part shade. They'll grow 18 to 20 inches tall. Bury them 6 inches, and it says they'll bloom in mid-spring. So we will see. It's an experiment for me, planting daffodils in Saskatchewan, first of all, and planting them here in this raised bed. If they're going to have any chance, it will be here on the south side of the house, where it's a little bit more protected. It's also nice, well-draining soil in here. I'm setting the tulips and then daffodils, group of tulips, group of daffodils. I'm setting them in, and I'm not going straight with the house. I'm trying to get them in on an angle, so maybe they'll look like a bit of a drift, almost like one that maybe has naturalized. And at the same time, I'm still leaving a strip at the front for 2 reasons. I don't want to plant the bulbs. I want to plant them far away from the edge for insulation purposes. And as well, I want to have a row of some sort of annuals here next year. I'll probably plant annuals in between. I'm going to try, but I do want something here with a little bit of height that will hide the dying down of the foliage. If you don't let the foliage die down properly, the bulb won't regenerate. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm doing groups of 9. I always think odd numbers are nice when it comes to planting in groups in the garden. I'm not planting them as I go because I really actually want to see when I'm done and how that all looks. Maybe I'll have to tighten them up some, or maybe I can add an extra one here and there at the end. And also I would forget what I planted and where. I definitely am going to have more daffodils than tulips. Now that I'm almost at the end, I thought it might be a good time to say that you plant pointy end up. The flat side, that's where the roots come out, that goes down. Same thing on a tulip. Little bit, it's also flat on the bottom, pointy end up. I have 6 tulips and quite a few daffodils left. I'm just going to go through again and see if I can stuff in a few more. You know, they like friends. So I have them all laid out. I fit in about as many as I could. And now I'm just going to go ahead and plant them all in. And then I will probably, it's a little bit dry, so I'll probably water them in a bit as well. I still have rainwater. So that's what I think I will do. This soil, certainly the top 6 inches or so, is very peaty, very loose, because it's a lot of compost, and my compost has a lot of the soil from the flower pots. So there's soilless mix, and then of course mixed with the rotten stuff from the compost. It sure makes a nice light soil, all that compost. It's just such a pleasure to work in, because you know the soil here is that, I think they call it muck, right? Or gumbo, that's what it's called. And boy, I'll tell you, when that gumbo is dry, it is almost impossible to dig in. Bulbs are a little bit of work, you know, for a few hours on a nice fall day. Boy, it sure is nice today. It's October 7th today, and I think it's supposed to go to 20 or around there, and pretty much the same thing for the rest of the week. So you just really have to take advantage of that nice weather and get the task done. It's, you know, we could just as easily be doing this in like what we had the other day, rain and 100-kilometer-an-hour winds. And sometimes you just don't get those nice days in the fall, or the soil's really wet, or you know, it's just not pleasant to go out and garden. No matter how much you like it, you still like the weather to be on your side. So this is quite enjoyable. Plus, I tend to not work very hard through the heat of summer, and once fall rolls around, I'm kind of ready to get at it. So I'm done. Tulip bulbs are planted, daffodil bulbs are planted, Oriental lilies are dug up and replanted here, and the Fritillaria are planted. And it feels really good when that's done. You and I will see the result in the spring, or whenever they choose to come up. Should be about May, I'm hoping. Thanks very much for joining in with me today. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Thanks a lot. See you.